Mary, thanks so much for taking time out of your day and time out of your writing to talk both about the new edition of your book and to answer questions from our AILA colleagues. I was curious, why did you decide to update the book now? What issues are you most focused on this year, for example? What's new in the 9th edition of your book?
The 9th edition, wow. I can't quite believe you're saying those words. We are generally and approximately on an every 2-year cycle. And the courts, including the Supreme Court, can really introduce dramatic changes to the law through their interpretation. So it's important to keep the book up to date. If you pick up an old version, and I know a lot of my colleagues like sort of just keep an old version, but they don't necessarily buy the updated version. Well, the law could have been, dramatically altered through primarily litigation, but also policy of the administration and the Department of Homeland Security. So, every year I say, okay, I don't need to maybe write it this year, or I can take a break. But then something big happens, and I'm concerned that the pages of immigration consequences of criminal activity be up to date for the reader. What's new? Well, I just sent you chapter 8. Chapter 8 is crimes outside of the aggravated felony and moral turpitude category. So I really got into cases involving child abuse, not so much domestic violence, but a lot of child abuse cases, because I think that the Board of Immigration Appeals goes too far in looking at state statutes, especially negligence and endangerment, where there's really no evil intent. Chapter 8 involves firearms. There's been some interesting cases on the categorical approach and looking at the federal generic definition of a firearm offense versus the state statute. And that might be analyzing the antique firearm exception. It might be looking at other distinctions between the state statute and the federal definition. So chapter 8 really gets into firearms. A personal pet peeve of mine is that in 2021, the courts and the Department of Homeland Security are still finding non-American citizens removable for prostitution and for acts of prostitution. And the question I ask as a feminist in the year 2021, how are we still finding people, and remember in immigration law, we're talking about not American citizens, right? How are we still finding them removable or inadmissible for acts of prostitution when we at the same time have all of these anti-trafficking statutes and initiatives, and we have the U visa and the T visa, and we're so concerned about women and girls being victimized by sex trafficking and human trafficking, yet we're still willing to point the finger at that same female and say, you're a bad person, that's a crime involving moral turpitude, and you're now subject to deportation, or you're inadmissible. And I find that to be a real hypocrisy in the application of the immigration laws. So I do have a sample memo in the 8th edition that I think I'm going to continue on to the 9th edition, involving why the act of being a prostitute or having a prostitution conviction really is not a crime involving moral turpitude and shouldn't make you inadmissible under 212A2D either. So those are just a few of the highlights. For those who read my book and listen to me, I really hone in on the analysis, because it's impossible with 50 states and a federal criminal code to highlight every case or find every case or print every case. Readers, if you think there is an important case, maybe yours, maybe someone else's, that I need to get into the book, please let me know. But in the meantime, my focus is to teach lawyers analysis. And part of that analysis is the realistic probability test. And what I find now, as I'm writing this summer, is that cases are won and lost on the realistic probability test. And the Board of Immigration Appeals will decide many cases against the non-American citizen based on a realistic probability test. And the circuits are all over the place on realistic probability and whether or not that analysis should apply. So I really, really hone in on that, and in every single chapter, and discussing all different kinds of offenses, I try to point out what was the analysis, because I need people to take away what was the analysis so they can win their own cases with their own clients' cases and crimes and offenses and accusations based on analysis, not based on a quick answer.